When I was 8 years old, I saw an ad in a comic book. You can play harmonica in 7 days or your money back. Send 50 cents in a box top. So I conned my mother out of 50 cents and sent in and got a harmonica in the mail. For Christmas, I got a guitar because I told my mom I wanted to be like Roy Rogers or Gene Autry, singing cowboy. When I was 15, rock and roll hit the radio. Bill Haley and the Comets, Fats Domino, Elvis, Carl Perkins. Some of us at a school formed a little band, and I learned that I could halfway sing. I got a job at a country music show doing rock and roll 10 minutes each hour for the young people. And one night Mel Tillis came in, and I don't know how many beers he'd had. He'd probably had a lot. And he come up to me after I finished. He said, "Boy, if you come to Nashville, I'll get you on records tomorrow." And it was like showing a steak to a wolf. So the day after high school, I came to Nashville looking for Mel Tillis. His manager set up auditions with the two most powerful men in country music, Chet Atkins and Owen Bradley. And I went into their office and played and sang "Johnny Be Good." And they both turned me down. They were real nice, though, you know. It was the nicest rejection I've ever had. "Well, son, I think you're really good. But, you know, we're just not doing this kind of music here." Owen Bradley invited me to watch a recording session. So that afternoon, I went over to his studio, the famous Quonset hut. I arrived about a half hour early. There was a staircase up in the back. He said, "If you'll sit halfway up these stairs, you'll see what we're doing." So I'm sitting up there. Nobody's come yet, no musicians or anything. And I'm looking around. There's no music stands. And I think, how are they going to do this? Pretty soon the musicians started coming in. When you're 18, everybody looks old. And I thought, who are these old guys? And then the artist came in, Brenda Lee, 13 years old. And I'm thinking, this is a kid. They're going to make a record with a kid. When I heard the first playback, my whole world changed. It's the greatest thing I'd ever heard. And at that moment I said, I don't want to sing. I want to do this. A year later, I came back to stay. I was renting a room from a songwriter friend of mine that I knew from Florida. His name was Kent Westbury. And he let me help him write a couple songs. And we wrote this song together, and it was kind of a pop song. And he said, "Why don't you sing the demo on this?" He said, this is not my style at all. And he was a real country singer. So he talked to his publisher into letting me sing the demo, and he pitched the demo to Cadence Records, Archie Blyer, and he called back and said, "Whoever that guy is, I want to record him on that song." It was called Cherryberry Wine. In addition to singing that demo for Kent Westbury, he talked his publisher into letting me play harmonica on some demos. The publisher got a call from Chet Atkins and said, "I want to record that song on an unknown singer from Sweden named Anne Margaret. And I want whoever played that harmonica to come and play exactly what he played on the demo." Publisher went with me. We walked in. He said, "Hey, Chet, here's the guy that played." And Chet looked at me and he said, "I know you." And I said, "Yeah, I auditioned for you a couple years ago." He said, "A black Les Paul custom sang 'Johnny Be Good.'" I couldn't believe he remembered that. And I said, "Yeah, that was me." And he said, "Man, I wish you'd have played that harmonica for me. We could have done something." Who knew? So I played on the record with Anne Margaret, and I thought I'd died and gone to heaven, you know, because this is what I wanted to do, is be a studio musician. The record, by the way, was a top 20 record. The song was called "I Just Don't Understand." Well, the great thing that came out of it was at the end of the session, the bass player, Bob Moore, walked over to me and he said, "You free Friday?" I was free the rest of my life. You know, my book looked like a white horse in a snowstorm. And I said, yeah, I'm free. And he said, come back to this studio. I'm recording Roy Orbison. And I was a huge Roy Orbison fan, you know. And we did a song called Candyman. And after that record was released, my phone started to ring. The whole Dylan thing is because of Bob Johnston. Bob Johnston was a songwriter from Texas. He wrote for the companies that were run by Colonel Tom Parker, the Elvis companies. They had a formula that when they would shoot an Elvis movie, they would send a script to all of their staff writers and say, okay, we need a song here, we need a song here. And the writers would compete for the spots in the movies. So Bob Johnston signed with them, and he wanted to be in that competition. So he called me he said, will you play demo sessions? And I said, yeah, sure. He said, will you lead the demo session? I said, yeah. He said, well, I want to do some demos. I'm trying to get songs in Elvis movies. I think he did get 7 songs in Elvis movies altogether, which was very good. And then songs that didn't make the movie, he'd take them around and, you know, pitch them to other artists. So he was in New York, and he had an appointment with a guy named Bob Mercy, head of A&R at Columbia Records. And he played him some of his songs, and Mercy said, where'd you cut these demos? And he said, in Nashville. And he said, did you produce these? And Bob, with, you know, that wheel clicked inside, and he said, yes, I did. And he said, you ever thought about producing records? And he said, yes, I have. And he said, how'd you like to produce a record for Columbia Records? And he said, sure. And he said, we have an artist on the end of her contract. This is going to be her last session. If you can come up with something that's a hit, you'll probably have a future in this company. The artist was Patti Page. So using his contacts that he had with the Elvis publishers in Los Angeles, he found out what they were looking for. And he recorded with Patti Page a song called Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte, which was a huge hit, saved her career, and now he became the golden boy of Columbia Records. And they said, okay, you're in. We're going to assign Bob Dylan to you. So he moved to New York. And he told me, if you ever come to New York, I'll get you Broadway theater tickets. I said, okay. So going to New York to the World's Fair, 1965, I guess it was. So I got to New York, and I called him. I said, okay, I'm here. Where's my Broadway tickets? He said, no problem, I got them. He said, I'm recording Bob Dylan this afternoon. Why don't you come over to the studio and meet him? I said, okay. I walked in, he introduced me to Dylan, and Dylan said, I'm going to do a song. Why don't you grab that guitar over there and play along? That was Desolation Row. I remember it was 11 minutes long. There was Dylan and me and an acoustic bass player. Acoustic bass player had another session. We had time for one cut, one playback, and one more cut, and the bass player left. So it was done. And that was it. I later found out from Bob that he wanted Dylan to come to Nashville, and Dylan was hesitant about it. And he said he was using me as bait. So I guess it worked. You know, in that time, I mean, that was the blossom of the Haight-Ashbury days, and Dylan was kind of the champion of those, the folk rock crowd, the protest crowd. The Bible of those people was Rolling Stone. And there were several writers of Rolling Stone that had a very poor attitude about Nashville. I mean, we were accused of being, you know, a song factory, cookie cutter records, you know, no art, just business. You know, I mean, hey, it is, I know it's art, but it is also the music business. You know, and I think a lot of those people, if they had their way, musicians would just, you know, smoke a little grass and play all night for nothing. But down here, we were doing it the right way. Musicians were treated with respect, and they were getting paid for what they did, and it was a great collaboration of producers, artists, and musicians. And hey, the record speaks for itself. Blonde on Blonde was unique for Nashville. Number one, they block booked the studio for the whole week. That was unheard of here. Country artists would book a 3-hour session, and that was it. And I remember we started on a Monday. We were called in. I'll tell you who was on it. It was Wayne and Kenny Buttrey and Pig Robbins and Henry Strelecki. And some of the sessions, Joe South was on it. And we had Al Cooper and Robbie Robertson from the band. We were called for a 2 p.m. session. Dylan's flight was late. He didn't come till 6. And when he came in, he said, I haven't finished writing the first song. You guys just, hang loose. We started recording at 4 a.m. the next morning. Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands, a 14-minute ballad. And everybody was like, please don't let me make a mistake. We were pretty tired by then. So that's the way the album started. But after that, it went like, kind of normal. I mean, for here in this town, it took the equivalent of actually playing like 39 hours to do Blonde on Blonde. I mean, for here, that was unheard of. A country artist would do an album in 12 hours or in 9 hours, the whole album. My first session with Johnny Cash, he recorded a Dylan song, It Ain't Me, Babe. The producer called me and he said, can you play harmonica like Bob Dylan? And I said, yes. In this town, we don't say no. We say yes, and then we go figure it out. We go to do it. And then several years later, I got a call to record Johnny Cash again, and he was going to do a vocal version of the Orange Blossom Special. This is 1965. And got to the middle. Boots Randolph was on the session also, a great tenor sax player. And he said, you know what? Why don't you two guys play the solo in the middle? And, it's always typically a fiddle song. And I'm trying to think, oh my gosh, what am I going to do on this? And I'm thinking about the fiddle in the chorus, and I figured out a way to kind of copy that by using 2 harmonicas. And after the session, Johnny Cash walked over to me and he said, can you show me how to do that? And so I did. I showed it to him and I said, I tell you what, I said, this is the 2 harmonicas you need, my present. And later he started playing them on his shows, on his concerts. So that was Orange Blossom Special. And then Dolly Parton, I could talk for hours about Dolly Parton. I met her the first day she came to town. She was out at Monument Records talking to Fred Foster. She was 18. And I happened to go out there to visit the promotion man. Fred called on the intercom to the promotion man. He said, what are you doing? He said, I'm in here talking to Charlie. He said, come in my office. I want you guys to hear something. So we walked in the office, and here's Dolly, 18 years old. And he said to her, play that song for these 2 guys you just played for me. And she started playing the guitar and singing, and we were both like, oh my gosh. It was, when you hear a unique talent. And at 18, she was amazing, So that's how I met her. And I was actually session leader on her first album. The album was called Dumb Blonde. It was for Monument. And then later she went to RCA, and she called me in to play on Joshua. And I played on one other record with her, a song called My Tennessee Mountain Home. But we remain good friends. I'll tell you one little story. This is typical Dolly Parton. After my father recognized the fact that I was being successful up here doing this music, then he got all into it, and he would visit me twice a year, and he'd go with me to sessions. He met all the musicians. They all knowed him. They all liked him. Then when they were doing hee-haw, he'd go with me to hee-haw. All the hee-haw girls loved my dad, and they would just, when he'd come, boy, they would make over him, and, you know, he was in hog heaven up here. And so he met Dolly Parton, and he was, like most men, we have a Southern saying, he was smitten. He was smitten when he met Dolly. So he had a photo made with her, of him and her in a hug. He had it blown up to 20 by 24. And when you walked in his house, the first thing you see is this photo of my dad and Dolly Parton. He lived Stuart, Florida, 30 miles north of West Palm Beach. So 3 or 4 years pass after this photo event, and he finds that Dolly's going to do a concert in West Palm Beach. So he buys a ticket to the concert. And my dad was, he was one of these gardener guys, a green thumb, you know, he could grow anything. His specialty was miniature roses. So he picked a bouquet of miniature roses and headed for West Palm Beach. Went up to the auditorium backstage door and knocked on the door, and he said some big security guy came out, and he said, I'm Charlie McCoy's father, and I brought these flowers for Dolly. And he said, the guy said, Mister, I don't care whose father you are, you're not getting in here. He said, I don't need to get in here. I just want you to give these to Dolly. And the guy said, okay, give me the flowers. Well, he figured that's the end of that. They're going in the trash. In the middle of the concert, she went back behind the drummer and came back with the flowers. And she got on the mic and she said, folks, I want y'all to know my boyfriend's here today. He's the father of Nashville musician Charlie McCoy, and he brought me these flowers. Now that is typical Dolly Parton. When I was 8 years old playing harmonica, if somebody would ever told me, this is what you're going to do for a living, I would have told them they were crazy. I've been blessed more than any human deserves to be. I've been doing this 53 years, and I'm still excited about it. So, to me, it's like a fairy tale, and it don't get any better than that.